In 2004, Terrence Hodson and his wife were gunned down.
A double execution style homicide that involved police corruption.
6 years later, criminal Carl Williams was bashed to death in jail.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't find out what was going on.
The killing struck at the heart of the criminal justice system.
I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it.
Drugs, criminals and corrupt police. Welcome back to Four Corners for the first program of 2015. There's never been a period like it in Australian criminal history. 36 people murdered in 12 years of slaughter within Melbourne's gangland community from 1998 to 2010. For the wider community, the gang war is now old news, but two cases in particular have left a stain on the Victorian police force over its failure to protect important police informers whose evidence was crucial to exposing alleged corruption in the force and alleged police involvement in murder. Tonight, in a joint Four Corners Fairfax media investigation, Nick McKenzie sheds fresh light on the cold-blooded murders of Terrence Hodson and his wife Christine at their Melbourne home, as well as the brutal slaying of notorious underworld criminal Carl Williams in his prison cell. Tonight's program features the two detectives at the heart of the Hodson case, who have decided to air their misgivings about the way that investigation was mishandled in an apparent attempt to contain a developing police scandal and dodge a royal commission. There are also new revelations in the Williams case. Here's Nick McKenzie's report.
In May 2004, a criminal called Terry Hodson was shot dead, along with his wife, in the most serious murders of Melbourne's bloody gangland war. The chance to solve this double homicide died 6 years later with another murder, that of gangland boss Carl Williams. These three deaths amount to one of the most serious attacks on the criminal justice system in Victoria's history, as two of the key insiders in the case reveal on Four Corners tonight.
A double execution style homicide that involved police corruption, well, you tell me.
It went to the very heart of justice for Victoria Police and the Victorian community.
The story begins in September 2003, when one of the force's leading anti-corruption investigators, Murray Gregor, received a phone call. He was told of the arrest of a ponytailed cop over the burglary of a house full of drugs and money.
You had millions of dollars worth of drugs subject to a burglary. I thought, here we go. This is going to be an all-nighter to start with.
The cop arrested was a drug squad detective, David Michel. Senior Constable Michel was meant to be keeping watch on the house as part of a police surveillance operation, rather than stealing the drugs inside.
I'd probably frame it as devastating, and senior members within the drug squad were obviously very upset and concerned about what had actually occurred.
Detective David Michel wasn't the only man arrested near the scene of the burglary. Also apprehended was Michel's criminal accomplice. His name was Terry Hodson, and he was an old-school career criminal.
He was a drug dealer. Not everybody's occupation as such that most people would go down, but it was a path that he went down.
Gregor soon learned that prior to the Oakley burglary, Hodson had been working as a registered drug squad informer. Hodson had been lagging on his mates in the criminal underworld to Michel and Michel's drug squad boss, a detective sergeant called Paul Dale.
I didn't know Paul before I became involved in this particular investigation, but from all accounts, and certainly from my experience with him, he's a very likeable sort of person. And he's a person in the you can feel very comfortable and at ease with, and he's someone who is an excellent communicator.
Sergeant Paul Dale joined the force aged 19 and earned his reputation dealing with tough old criminals and the up-and-comers in Melbourne's northern suburbs.
I was a man that I guess was larger than life when I was a very young detective sergeant running my own crime squad crew. We prided ourselves on working hard and playing hard. I loved it, I lived it, and I was successful at it.
After earning his 3 sergeant stripes and working homicide, Paul Dale joined the drug squad. There, Sergeant Paul Dale and Senior Constable David Michel used Hodson as an informer to find out about the activities of some of Melbourne's worst criminals.
As an informer, it's probably, one of the riskiest undertakings you can do as a criminal. If you're being identified or outed as an informer, well, obviously the risk is elevated tenfold in relation to you, to your personal safety.
As Gregor investigated the Oakley drug house burglary, he received no help from Michelle. But during a meeting at a police station, Gregor sensed that Hodson might be willing to talk.
And this is very much just a, if you like, off a record chat about trying to lay the situation and what the circumstances were. And Terry, at that stage, gave stronger indications that he was probably prepared to assist myself in the investigation of the matter. And it was certainly at that meeting that Terrence indicated that there were other police involved apart from Meachel. My recollection is that Terry, when asked were there other police involved in the burglary at Dublin Street, Terry indicated with 3 fingers out, placed on the table, which indicated to me that it was a sergeant involved representing 3 stripes.
At a later meeting in this park, Terry Hodson began to name names and, in the hope of getting a reduced jail sentence, agreed to become Murray Gregor's star witness in a case against allegedly corrupt police. Gregor knew his challenge lay in keeping Hodson alive so he could testify against the so-called 3-striper, the sergeant allegedly involved in the burglary.
Well, he said that it was arranged by Paul Dale and David Meachel. They enlisted Terrence Hodson to become involved in the burglary. The 3 of them were to commit the burglary together, and Terry Hodson would be the person who would move any of the drugs that were stolen from the premises. And basically the proceeds of those drugs sold would come back and be split equally amongst the 3 of them.
In late 2003, Gregor moved to charge Paul Dale, David Michel and his star witness Terry Hodson over the Oakley drug house burglary.
I was quite satisfied in my mind that Terry Hodson was being truthful in relation to his involvement and the involvement of Paul Dale and David Meachel.
But Dale denied any involvement, and he appeared determined to fight the burglary charges when Gregor arrested him.
He was calm, he was cool, and he was collected in relation to it.
No role at all, no knowledge of it at all.
Murray Gregor knew his case against Paul Dale relied on Terry Hodson making it to the witness box alive, but Hodson wasn't certain he would.
Terry explicitly told me that he had serious concerns that Paul Dale would be a person capable of killing him, and I certainly took that threat seriously.
There were also plenty of criminals who could have wanted Hodson dead because they suspected he was a police informer.
Get flogged.
He said he was a dead man walking. That's why he said he didn't know if it'd be the police or if it'd be the Crims that would come and kill him.
What did you think?
The police.
My instant reaction was, Terry, you got to get in a witness protection program. I said, what is it going to take to get you in that?
He was asked to go into witness protection, and at this point, Mandy and Andrew were both on board, and my mum was prepared to go, and I said no.
Why?
Because I just recently got married and had a baby.
I won't hurt you. I won't hurt you. I just want to... Who's that, mate? Just give you a little bit of that.
As a proud grandfather, Terry Hodson relished his role as family patriarch and protector of his wife Christine, his children and grandchildren.
Thanks for coming. Okay.
When Hodson's daughter Nikki refused to enter the witness protection program, Terry Hodson told Murray Gregor that he too would not enter.
Because my dad would not leave one of his family members behind. I don't think he could face the fact that if I was living separately, maybe something could have happened to me. I could have been gotten to, and I don't think he could have lived with that.
The date.
So I suppose the guilt lays upon me.
Terry and Christine Hodson's decision to go it alone was just that. In 2004, Victoria Police had no formal system to safeguard informers who did not want to enter the witness protection program, but who were still at grave risk. Murray Gregor instead relied on police technical officers to review Hodson's already well-fortified unit in Melbourne's affluent eastern suburbs. They added some sensor lights and a second security camera, but that was it.
Why wasn't there a scheme in place to ensure at the very least the Victoria Police of its own accord had regular roving patrols, perhaps had a covert camera in a neighbour's place, other measures?
Look, in hindsight, they're things that obviously you would do. At the time, they weren't seriously considered.
Nor, it seems, was a proper recording system. Hodson was told to use a cheap VHS system with 7 tapes, marked Monday to Sunday. Gregor and experts say this was outdated and easily defeated.
Look, I think it comes down to dollars and cents, Nick. It's a dollar decision at the end of the day.
Pretty poor decision, given a man's life's on the line.
Disappointing decision, absolutely.
In early 2004, Murray Gregor had a dramatic discovery. His finding allegedly placed Paul Dale in bed with one of the most feared men in Melbourne's underworld.
Terrence informed me that Paul Dale had been involved in a corrupt relationship, or was involved in a corrupt relationship with Carl Williams and his crew.
Gregor learned that after 2002, Paul Dale had allegedly begun a corrupt relationship with Carl Williams' crew, just as the drug boss was becoming one of the most prolific murderers in the underworld. It's an extraordinary allegation that Carl Williams' father, George, himself a criminal, says is true, telling Four Corners that Paul Dale was paid off by his son in return for information.
I know on one occasion he got $6,000 off me to give to him, but I assume that he paid him on other occasions as well.
Was Carl pretty happy that he had a policeman, as you say, in his pocket?
In one way he was pretty happy about it because he was getting the information, and in the other way, once you start dealing with him, there's no turning back.
Murray Gregor says that Hodson told him that in early 2003, Paul Dale had asked Hodson to find out the location of Carl Williams' enemy, criminal Jason Moran, who Williams was hunting.
He was seeking the location of Jason Moran.
Gregor says Hodson also alleged that Paul Dale said he could help organise underworld murders if he was paid enough. This was one of several untested allegations that Dale would later deny. But Gregor knew the extraordinary corruption claims needed to be investigated and either proven or dismissed.
Hodson was alleging that Paul Dale was seeking opportunity and work to murder somebody.
To work as a hitman?
Yes.
This is at sort of the height of the gangland killings. What was your reaction, given the scale of those allegations, to those allegations?
Well, I nearly fell off my seat. It was extremely serious. So I was very eager to collect as much information as I could.
The claim that Paul Dale was working with Carl Williams' crew was the most serious allegation of the gangland war. It must have greatly alarmed the force's most senior police. It should have also prompted a major investigation into the extent of the pair's relationship.
Was it investigated thoroughly?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Should it have been?
Yes.
Gregor told his superiors about the fresh Dale corruption allegations, believing they should be probed by a major task force.
Well, it allows you to undertake more extensive inquiries, it allows you to speak to more people, it allows you to collect various aspects of intelligence which might be located elsewhere within the law enforcement community.
And you had none of that?
No.
While there would be no task force to target Paul Dale, the allegedly corrupt cop was able to find his own police to work for him.
There were a number of senior police members which were very close to Paul Dale and acting as conduits of information.
Who was investigating them?
No one.
Murray Gregor was not only badly undermanned, he was also in the dark. Unbeknown to Gregor, organised crime investigators were separately tapping the phones of Carl Williams and his crew to implicate them in gangland killings. These phone taps recorded Paul Dale reaching out to Carl Williams, and years later they would become a critical piece of evidence.
I told Carl the next day that I had a phone call and he found out it was Paul Dale that rang him, and he told me he phoned Paul Dale and said he'd catch up with him.
That sort of information would have been crucial in relation to my investigation and obviously the protection of Terrence Hodson.
Sometime after these phone calls, George Williams alleges he drove his son to a meeting in Melbourne's outer north. A police tracking device on George Williams' car recorded it stopping not far from a building site where Paul Dale was working while suspended from the force.
I see this blue four-wheel drive behind me, and Carl said, pull over. I pulled over, it pulled up beside me. I seen it was Paul Dale. Carl hopped out the car, hopped in with Paul Dale. He done a U-turn, and it was a vigorous U-turn. He hit some big rocks and that and just kept on driving.
George Williams says that after this meeting, his son Carl was tight-lipped, but told him Dale had discussed problems he was having with a certain criminal.
Well, I took it to mean Hodson.
Terry Hodson?
Yes.
Murray Gregor knew none of this back in 2004, but after Hodson reported that someone had breached his home security system, Gregor's fears increased.
Certainly there was a sensor which was located halfway down the driveway towards Terry's unit, which was located at the back of the block, and that sensor unit had been moved, which to me rung alarm bells. And I approached Terry. I recall him saying, "Murray, it started." He said, "I'm a dead man walking."
It was last night just after 6 that the man and woman were found.
The killing points to a direct link between the spate of gangland murders and police corruption.
Okay, won't be too long. Take care. Bye. It was late evening. I didn't know at that stage, certainly, the enormity of the investigation as it would then unfold.
On Sunday evening, 16th of May 2004, Homicide Detective Senior Sergeant Charlie Bezina was called to the home of Terry and Christine Hodson.
Your eyes are going left, right and centre because you are observing as you go. You've got to let the crime scene tell you a story. And the story this was telling me was that there was no signs of forced entry, and it was pretty impregnable. There's one way in, there's a front door. There was a couch behind them. They'd been quietly smoking a roll-your-own cigarette there, which was still on the coffee table. So I suppose what would run through their heads is basically saying, well, no, the worst case, we're not going to get killed until such time, look, I need you to get on your knees. And I think that's when the crunch would have come, that they would have realised, we're off here, we're going to get killed.
Terry Hodson and his wife Christine had each been shot twice in the back of the head.
The casings were placed on the body. The brazenness of just picking up the empty shell and placing it on a body. Why bother doing that? That shows to me calm, cool, collected. We're looking at a hired gun. No two ways about it.
I immediately thought that this was a reprisal for him giving evidence against police. So, yeah, I was obviously very bitterly disappointed about the circumstances of it, and I understood the likely ramifications that the case against Paul Dale would fall away as a result of those murders.
Gregor says that within hours of the murder, senior police moved to play down the possibility that corrupt police might be involved, a position they would cling on to for years.
I think it's too early to say that these are definitely related to the gangland killings. We haven't made that call, and I think we're some way from making that call.
It was a potentially dangerous move. I think that set in motion the approach that they undertook in relation to the investigation, the murders, and that there was a reluctance to put the resourcing or elevate it to a level which indicated that, you know, there's likely to be police corruption or involvement in the murders.
What should have happened?
Well, there should have been immediately an independent task force put together in relation to the matter. I felt very strongly that police were involved in the murders and that should be a priority focus.
But there would be no task force, and the case was assigned to homicide detective Charlie Bezina. He says his first concern with the case involved the security measures police had provided Hodson. The killer had found the VHS recording system and stole the tape recording his entry into the house.
And it was so obvious. You could see the video recorder once you went into the house. All these tapes were marked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the Sunday one was missing. You know, so obvious, but, you know, again, ineptness.
At any time, if equipment is required, people will only have to make application, provide the justifications for the equipment, and it will be funded.
From memory, I think it come down as a cost issue. But again, it bewildered me again. Well, hang on a minute. Here you have an informer giving you information, and he'd already made a statement to the ethical standards people about involvement of certain police in allegations of corrupt doings. And then why not go above that and say, well, no, this is not a normal run-of-the-mill. This is something that's more intrigued and more involvement, that this guy's got the potential to blow it wide open. Here we are standing over his body now.
Within hours, Bezina had decided to arrest and question Paul Dale, as well as begin investigating a number of other suspects who could have wanted Hodson dead.
I, as an investigator, look at it and say, why would someone want to kill these people? And the obvious thing was, well, they're police informers. So you start looking at other criminals. which is obvious. But because there's a police corruption involvement, again, it throws it wide open that it could be one of our own.
Paul Dale had a strong alibi that he didn't shoot the Hodsons himself. But soon Charlie Bezzina learned something very disturbing. Secret police files on Hodson's work as a police informer had been stolen from the drug squad in the hours after the botched Oakley drug house burglary. Prior to Hodson's murder, these files had been leaked to the very criminals Hodson had been lagging on, putting him in grave danger.
There are a whole series of possible explanations as to how that information may have found its way into the public domain. And until we've had a chance to work through all of that, and that will take us some time, I'm not in a position to say that the information the ABC say they have seen is from a confidential police document or not.
It certainly created a massive issue for the Victoria Police in itself, the fact that this information had got out there at the hands of clearly police, because there's no way else, no criminals don't have access to it. The most obvious you would think there is Paul Dale and Michel. They're the obvious ones to look at.
Were you pretty much certain that whoever leaked those police files wanted Terry dead?
That's certainly one conclusion I came to, absolutely. That would be probably the main one, yeah.
To head off calls for a royal commission, the Victorian government announced that famed Queensland police corruption buster Tony Fitzgerald would travel to Victoria to investigate the leaked Hodson files.
And I just waited day after day and never set eyes on Tony Fitzgerald, never spoke to him, he never rang me. And he then went back and that was it. And again, I was bewildered about, well, what was that all about? What was the purpose of bringing Tony Fitzgerald down? And I think he was down there probably less than a week.
Tony Fitzgerald's brief may have been narrow, but he still named Paul Dale as the obvious suspect in the theft of the Hodson files. Yet in a finding seized on by senior police, Fitzgerald produced no evidence linking Paul Dale or police corruption to the Hodson murders.
The point I would make is that we need to operate on the basis of evidence, and until we get evidence that can prove the connection, I maintain that there is no proven connection between the two.
But the man responsible for finding this evidence, Charlie Bezzina, says that like Murray Gregor before him, he was in the dark about all the information police held about Paul Dale's links to Carl Williams, including crucial phone taps. And Bezzina says, like Gregor, he too was undermanned.
It was growing bigger and bigger, and I obviously thought to myself over a period of time, well, why has this been left with me? It just seemed it was being treated like a normal homicide investigation. And they should have thrown this dedicated task force from the very outset, because blind Freddy could have seen the tentacles this was leading to.
Tonight, Murray Gregor reveals that he was so concerned at the force's handling of the Hodson murder case, he broke ranks. He called Victoria's newly created anti-corruption agency, the Office of Police Integrity, or OPI, to raise concerns that not enough was being done to investigate Paul Dale.
I had concerns about the associates of Paul Dale, who were current serving senior members of Victoria Police, who were apparently engaging in questionable activity. I had submitted that information through to ESD Command, and the information that came back to me was that there was no desire or willingness to explore those issues, and it didn't sit comfortably with myself, so I made the decision to go to OPI in relation to the matter.
Murray Gregor soon found himself looking over his shoulder.
Certainly, I subsequently did receive some threats, yes.
What sort of threats?
Phone calls in the night, things of that nature.
What was said?
There were. All I'll say in relation to the matter is it was very clear that, people were not happy with my involvement in the matter.
Because you were prodding things, weren't you?
I was trying to, yes.
For the next 2 years, the Hodson murder case stalled. then an extraordinary development. Carl Williams had begun a 35-year sentence in Barwon Prison, and after serving less than a year, he reached out to Deputy Commissioner Simon Overland and said he had a story to tell. Carl Williams' allegations would place police corruption at the very centre of Victoria's most significant gangland killing.
He was very worried, yes. He knew the consequences, what could happen, but the police assured him that he would be safe.
Aiming to cut his jail time, get significant inducements for his family, and possibly pocket a $1 million reward, Carl Williams alleged to police he'd helped organise the murder of Terry Hodson at the behest of a policeman who Williams claimed he'd been bribing for years, Paul Dale. George Williams says his son told police it was at the meeting in Melbourne's north that the murder was, according to Carl Williams, allegedly commissioned.
At the meeting with Paul Dale, he wanted to get someone to get rid of the Hodsons. Hodson, not Hodsons, Hodson.
Carl Williams later also alleged he'd helped find a hitman to murder Terry Hodson, notorious gangland killer Rodney Collins.
Collins went to see Carl to get payment, and Carl said it weren't supposed to be what happened with the lady. He said these things happen or something.
When you said Carl said to Rodney Collins, what happened to the lady, what do you mean?
Well, why did they kill the lady? Why did they kill Mrs. Christine Hodson? He asked him to get rid of Terrence, not Christine. But I suppose that's just a natural thing. She's a witness. So whoever done it, if Rodney did do it, he wouldn't leave a witness around.
Carl Williams' allegations rocked the police force because they suggested what had been downplayed for so long, that a cop was allegedly involved in a gangland murder.
What we said all along is when we find evidence of it, we would pursue it. I don't have to protect anybody. What I'm doing in Victoria Police and what people like Simon Overland and the management of Victoria Police are doing is trying to create an organisation that is corruption resistant and that the community trusts.
Faced with Carl Williams' allegations, Simon Overland moved swiftly. He created a major task force that, during the next 2 years, would slowly piece together the information that Murray Gregor and Charlie Bezina never knew about. Old phone taps and other evidence that would lead police to charge Paul Dale in 2009 with the murder of Terry Hodson.
Paul Dale was a person of interest throughout. We will be alleging that he commissioned the murder.
Dale maintained his innocence and attacked the credibility of Carl Williams.
I'd like to ask people to probably look at the details of the person making the allegations, firstly, and then secondly, look at the motivation behind what he's done.
I think with Carl Williams, yes, he'd been involved in murders. You're not going to have honest John Citizen come forward and say, listen, I'm going to tell you about 10 underworld killings, because they won't know. But Carl Williams was in the business of knowing. So, yes, his credit's going to be attacked, but I think you're going to be able, they would have been able to go away and corroborate it through some telephone intercept material that they collected over 7 or 8 years, a whole range of things.
I'm totally innocent of the murder of Christine and Terrence Hodson.
After 5 years of investigations, police have laid charges over the murder of police informer Terrence Hodson.
Paul Dale was once a detective sergeant in the drug squad. He's now accused of organising one of Victoria's most notorious murders.
After Dale was charged, Carl Williams was outed in the underworld as a star informer, helping police. Soon, word spread that Williams was not only helping police solve the Hodson murders, but other unrelated gangland killings as well.
Oh, they wanted him to talk about anything that he knew, and they wanted to download him completely.
What are we talking about?
The underworld goings-on.
The murders?
The murders, yes.
The question would be, in a lot of, I suppose, prisoners' minds, who's he going to talk about? What's he going to say? What have I actually told Carl Williams? Is he going to lag on me? So there's a whole range of things that would be going through many criminals' minds.
Detective Senior Sergeant Ron Iddles, a veteran of the homicide squad, was working on unsolved underworld murder cases when Williams began helping police. One such case involved the murder in 2000 of Carl Williams' bodyguard, Richard Mladinich.
Richard was an associate of Carl Williams, and Carl Williams had a philosophy, and it was something like this. Those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know.
But what Iddles did not tell the public was that Carl Williams had by 2010 hinted he could help solve the Mladinich murder. This meant Williams potentially implicating a close associate, a feared underworld criminal called Rocco Arico.
They were pretty good mates at one stage for about 4 to 5 years. They used to venture out together and do a lot of things together.
So Rocky knew Carl's secrets and Carl knew Rocky's secrets?
Yes, yeah.
Ron Iddles?
Ron Iddles declined to speak to Four Corners about the Mladinich case or his suspect Rocco Arico because it is an ongoing inquiry. But Four Corners has learned that Iddles planned to visit Carl Williams in Barwon Prison and see if he would implicate Arico in the murder. It's a development which put Williams in grave danger.
It's obvious that, not only Rocky, it's a lot of other people too that would assume that if Carl's talking about Dale, he'd be talking about them.
Ron Iddles would never get to meet Carl Williams and see if he would inform on Rocco Arico. By April 2010, Williams was in a maximum security compound in Barwon Prison with 2 cellmates, both notorious underworld figures. But police and prison authorities had overlooked some crucial details. One of these 2 cellmates was Matthew Johnson, a notoriously violent criminal who hated police informers. The second cellmate, who can't be named for legal reasons, was a close associate and in phone contact with none other than Rocco Arico.
You're giving me some information now which I've never heard of before, and that is that Rocky Arico was ringing in that cell. If I had known that, of course I would have been concerned.
I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. I thought, how could this be allowed to happen?
As he read the morning paper, Carl Williams was felled from behind. Ten minutes after Johnson murdered Williams, the second cellmate, who was Rocco Arico's friend, phoned Arico with the news. It would take 27 minutes before the prison guards responded to the murder.
Police said Carl Williams was bashed by a fellow prisoner at 12:50 p.m, but an ambulance wasn't called for about 30 minutes.
I don't want to speculate or comment about that. As far as we were aware, there was nothing that was giving us concern.
Carl Williams murdered, a violent end to a violent life.
It would be many more hours before Carl's father, George, was told what had happened.
Carl Williams has met a violent death in prison.
I think I rang the prison on 4, 5, 6, I can't recall how many times. And they said, no, everything's all right, we'll talk to you later. By this time it was all over the news and half of Victoria or half of Australia knew what was going on, and I just couldn't.
You couldn't find out?
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't find out what was going on.
What actually happened, as I say, is really, really clear, but how it was able to happen and why it happened will be key questions that we need to answer.
Prison staff tried to revive him, but he went into cardiac arrest.
I'm hoping it's just really a poor decision-making process and it wasn't something more sinister. But you wonder how many of these bad decisions can occur in a particular investigation.
The police case that Paul Dale organised Terry Hodson's murder relied on keeping Carl Williams alive.
I can't say yes, I would forgive him, but it would have been nice that he actually had the opportunity to give his evidence, the same as Dad. They both didn't get their opportunity. The police will always be, in my eyes, guilty. They have to be held accountable. Their duty of care failed. Whether my mum was forced to watch my dad get murdered or vice versa, I'd hate to even think what they were going through, and that's always gone through my mind many, many a time, and I've cried many a tear over it.
William's death has prompted a still ongoing inquiry about whether it was, as police suspect, Rocco Arico who gave the order to have Williams killed. Paul Dale was not involved with Williams' death, but outgoing Police Chief Commissioner Ken Lay recently told a still unresolved coronial inquest that police still believe Paul Dale is responsible for the murder of Terry Hodson. Dale denies this, and the counsel assisting the coroner says there's not enough evidence to say just who killed the Hodsons. Former Chief Commissioner Simon Overland, who oversaw the Hodson and Williams murder probes, declined to comment to Four Corners, as did his predecessor Christine Nixon and his replacement Ken Lay. But recently there's been another major development. Victoria's anti-corruption body has launched an inquiry into the force's alleged mismanagement of a third gangland figure who was helping police on the Hodson case. Tonight, Ron Eddles tells Four Corners he refused an order from Simon Overland to take a statement from this figure because doing so could have exposed them to underworld reprisals or even death.
I had a conversation with that witness and said, if I take this statement, these are the likely implications. So I didn't take the statement. So sometimes I think the priorities are wrong. Yes, we all want to have a successful outcome in relation to court cases, but I don't think we do it at the expense of a witness' life.
Ron Eddles now heads Victoria's police union, and he, along with Bazina and Gregor, say reforms are needed to better protect witnesses and informers, including those who don't want to join the witness protection program.
If someone doesn't sign up, we need to look at how are we going to look after that witness that hasn't totally signed up to go. And it may be, still could be a relocation, could be security cameras. And we often forget, once a witness has given us evidence, sometimes we think, well, that's it, job's been done, we got the conviction, let's move on. That witness is still at risk for the rest of their life.
It is very delicate, it is volatile in running police informers and looking after witnesses. We do need outside organisations looking at us and saying, well, right, you're not doing that properly.
Today, Paul Dale lives in regional Victoria, near the small town where he grew up. He views himself as one of the greatest victims of this still unresolved ordeal.
I didn't do it. I'm here to tell people I didn't do it. I've written my book for people to read so that they can read what happened to me and the reasons, or what I can only suggest are the reasons that those things happened to me.
Do you think Paul Dale may have gotten away with murder?
Yes.
How does that sit with you?
Not very well.
A few points to make in conclusion. Former Drug Squad Sergeant Paul Dale declined to be interviewed for this program, but in his submission to the coronial inquiry into the Hodson murders, he maintained his innocence, saying the police case was deeply flawed, relied on flaky witnesses and ignored other suspects. His Drug Squad partner, David Michelle, has been convicted and jailed over the Oakley burglary. The Victorian Police issued a statement to the program acknowledging the need for improvement in the handling of police informants, that a review had been set up and a number of recommendations implemented. Their full statement is available on the website. The Hodson coronial inquest will soon hand down its findings. Next week, the scandal behind the government's multi-billion-dollar employment programs. Until then, good night.
You can watch tonight's program again on iView or see more of our research and interviews at abc.net.au/4corners.